To the final validation webinar of the ClusterNanoRoad project. My name is Marina Dias. I take part on the ClusterNanoRoad project represented here, or representing here INL, the International Iberian Nanotechnology Laboratory, which is the coordinator of this initiative. Today we have a 4 presentation session followed by a slot for questions and answers. In the meantime, if you need or if you want to place any question, you may text it under the chat box so that we will keep track on your questions and probably we will be able to address it during the presentation. Okay, the agenda for today. I will start with a brief presentation of the project. Eva Fadil from INO will then tell you about the value chain mapping for key enabling technologies. Anais from CEBR will then tell you more about the pilot actions to support the key enabling technologies elapsed during the project. And the session of presentations will be finished with an explanation of the future actions roadmap, which is basically an instrument that will support NMBP regions. And this presentation will be delivered by Claire. So starting with the brief presentation of the ClusterNanoRoad project, this is a 30-month action. The project actually ends today. And it has been submitted to address the topic on NMBP 33 back in 2016, which is about networking and sharing of best experiences in using regional cluster strategies with a focus on supporting innovation in the NMBP thematic area. So the central scope of the project was to identify the challenges surrounding the NMBP area and the smart specialization, and at the end, the role of clusters providing concrete inputs into the development of smart specialization strategies. At the end, aiming at supporting the involvement of cluster in the definition of regional smart specialization strategies, thus ensuring the uptake of NMPB and key enabling technologies into multiple sectors across Europe. Sorry, I would appreciate if those that are not speaking could mute.
I will mute everybody now, Marina.
Okay, thank you. So besides this support on involving the clusters in the definition of the regional strategies, also providing recommendations to mobilize the clusters itself, the regional authorities, and other actors from the value chain, as well as the main relevant stakeholders, so that all the key relevant actors are actually involved and help shaping the strategic priorities, thus supporting the future and coordinated regional smart specialization strategies and cluster policies at the trans-regional and transnational level. You can change, Claire, please. Next slide, thank you. So, the ClusterNanoRoad conceptual approach, the project was based in a 4-stage approach to ensure an effective engagement and to ensure mediation to define and integrate the NMBP policies with the regional smart specialization strategies, always in close collaboration with cluster strategies. Stage 1, it was mainly about mapping and benchmarking. These activities have been designed to map and analyze the state of play, so meaning that to identify the role and engagement of clusters, the existing key relevant initiatives, existing KET initiatives in the NMBP area. Okay, so we get like background to further develop the project. Second step, the road mapping stage. It was about consolidating the learning from the previous stage, this mapping and benchmarking, into a roadmap with a set of policy recommendations that could then be used by regions in decision making, namely for integrated RIS3 with the cluster policies. At the third stage, It consisted of the pilot actions with clusters. So the consortium has implemented a set of pilot activities aiming at developing multi-stakeholders dialogue among clusters, policymakers, and industry, so the most relevant stakeholders. Finally, at the fourth stage, a final roadmap has been produced. We will give, during this presentation, further details on these roadmaps, sorry. Then, in terms of public consultation, and going to the next slide, we can highlight in the project 3 main activities that feed into the roadmap. So we have the case studies mapping the good practices from key initiatives. In total, we have 10 good practices from, we have identified 10 good practices from 10 different countries for benchmarking and 6 recommendations. This was followed by 10 pilot actions and 6 validation workshops. All this work gave ground to the creation of the roadmap, which is already available under the ClusterNanoRoad website, and which collects the conclusions from the entire project. Claire, please. We go now to the deliverables from the project. Resulting from this background work during the first 12 months of the project, and that have provided the state of play, we have 3 main deliverables. It's the mapping of EU and national initiatives. We have the benchmarking guide, which sets the key enabling technology cases for visualization of good practices, success factors, and barriers for implementation. We have also, from this background work, the presentation of the novel approaches and categorization of success factors. And then we have the roadmap to support regions and clusters in the design, in the implementation and assessment of different mechanisms to support the uptake of key enabling technologies through cluster-based actions. Of course, with the support of the pilot actions activities and the validation workshops, which have contributed to this roadmap and the validation of the benchmarking, the initial benchmarking. So all these deliverables are public, and they may be visualized and are available for download at the ClusterNanoRoad website. The next slide will just show the way they look at the website. So please be invited to access the website and download what's available there. So I will now hand the lift to Eva, which she will present the. Thank you, Claire. So she will present the results from the value chain mapping.
Thank you very much, Marina. Exactly. I would like to shortly introduce myself. So my name is Eva Fadil. I'm project manager at InnoTSD, a consultancy acting on European-wide level, and we're a partner of ClusterNanoRoad, and we have been in charge of the activity that was especially taking place at the beginning regarding the mapping of existing initiatives that bring together NMVP or KET factors, working on regional innovation strategies, and of course involving clusters. If you could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So the mapping exercise that we have undertaken is exactly looking at the intersection of three major elements that I just mentioned: the clusters, the RS3, and the NMVP or KETs. So we wanted to see what were the initiatives on European level, so European-wide, but national level, of course, regional level, sometimes local level, that contributed to shaping RS3 strategic priorities in the field of NMVP or KETs here, and that were somehow involving clusters. So if you speak about initiatives, of course, these were quite various types. It could be services, projects, equipment that was established, test platforms, for example, but also institutions like incubators, business startup centers, or science technology parks, etc. And this mapping exercise that we have undertaken was not done, of course, to find an exhaustive overview of existing initiatives in Europe, but to see what were key trends in this sense and to be able to identify important examples. Next slide, please. So here I would like to present you some of our main findings. The first one, and the one that we were especially looking at, was to be able to confirm that there's a strong correlation between the KET sectors, related innovation strategies in Europe, and the presence of clusters in these sectors and in the different territories. So if you have a look on the map that's here on the right-hand side of the slide, you can see everything that is in green or yellow-orange background color represents the territories where we have corresponding S3 priorities, and the small red icons represent initiatives that we have been able to identify in our mapping exercise and where clusters are involved. Of course, as I said, just examples, but it shows that there's a very good overlap and that clusters exist all over these territories, and there is a strong potential for interaction. For example, the involvement of clusters in the policy or product design, in the setup, and of course also in the implementation of innovation strategies. Next slide, please. Other findings have been that there are actually a number of initiatives in NMVP and KET sectors that are related to innovation strategies. To just cite some examples, there are a number of partnership projects that can be identified on the Smart Specialization platform for industrial modernization, or in short, S3 platform, which are or can be considered pilot. Hello, can you still hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I'm very sorry. I just lost my screen. I think my computer is doing some update. I'm sorry.
Okay.
So, very good timing, but at least I'm still on the line. So you can see the partnership projects on the S3 platform. These can be considered pilot projects and large-scale demonstrators. And we can see here that there's a number of EU regions that collaborate in KETs-related sectors. Then another example is, of course, everything that's related to the Vanguard initiative, and that's related to new growth through smart specialization, and where quite a large number of regions all over Europe is involved in collaboration projects that are related to European priority areas, and several of these are tackling aspects of KETs. And then, in addition to this, and these are initiatives that have been running at the moment, we have done the mapping, but we're still at early stages, and now in the meantime they have really quite well developed. So we can cite especially the InnoSep1 project, where several organizations and very often clusters collaborate on European level to implement cross-sector and cross-border collaboration for the definition and for the further implementation of new value chains. And then there is also another initiative that is called ECP S3 partnerships, so European Strategic Cluster Partnerships for Smart Specialization, where clusters collaborate in partnerships of 3, 4, 5, maybe 8 clusters who want to find a common strategy regarding S3 strategies. Now here on the right-hand side of the slide, you can see a small graph. It's just to show you a little bit the types of the existing initiatives in NMVP and KET sectors that are relevant to innovation strategies, according to a survey that we have undertaken as part of the ClusterNanoRoad project. And we can see here that a majority of the cluster managers and policymakers who have responded to our survey were aware of the RS3 NMVP specializations in their territory. Next slide, please. So another finding, and this is just to conclude on this, is that overall there's a very good incentive to involve clusters. So as we have seen before on the map, there is a high potential for interaction because clusters are very much present on the territories and in the sectors that we have been looking at in Europe. and there's already a good number of regional initiatives that existed in the KET sectors. However, at the time of our mapping, only a few of the initiatives identified were cross-border initiatives, but we think that through the initiatives that I just mentioned were a little bit recently implemented, this is quite well changed, especially the S3 platform and reconfirm initiative, and also the ECP S3 initiatives should lead to a number of collaborative initiatives involving classes all over Europe. And regarding the best ways of involving classes for the RAS3 sorry, definition, but also implementation has been identified as being especially meeting workshop, also of course consulting and surveys, lobbying activities. Next slide, please. Now, I said before we were speaking about the mapping of KETs initiatives involving classes, and here is an overview of a benchmarking exercise that we have done. So we wanted to show initiatives existing on European level that were covering all NMBP sectors and that were planned or implemented at the time of our exercise. So we can see that in the RIS3, there's a number of initiatives that have emerged as concrete support measures for the implementation. And classes very often act as facilitators and network connectors between the policymakers and the stakeholders from research and innovation landscape. And often they have been contributors, but very often even leaders of these initiatives, of these projects. So our benchmarking report highlights 11 cases, because we very recently added an 11th case that was found through our activity in the ClusterNanoRoad project very recently. And these different benchmarking cases highlight the successes, but also the difficulties sometimes encountered by the different actors involved. So when we speak about the actors, it's of course the clusters, but also the players from research, development, and innovation, and regional authorities. And we can see here, you can see the small flags that we have covered initiatives from very different European countries, so all over Europe. And we have been able to identify the, initiatives that relate to all the sectors, and very often even we're involving several sectors. So we have here cross-sectoral initiatives. Next slide, please. So this slide shows a map, so just a different way of showing the different benchmarking exercises. I'm not going through all the different cases, just wanted to show you this as an overview regarding the country coverage, but also the sector coverage. And what is interesting here, and why we recommend to take a look at this benchmarking guide that you can find on our website, is that the characteristics and the major elements that we have been able to identify here are all transferable. So we think that these can allow other regions or other territories to learn from the existing experiences, and potentially also from the difficulties, and thus avoid the failures or possibly going in the wrong direction. Next slide, please. So in order to be able to summarize this all and also see what are really the trends and the success factors, we have done some categorization. We have taken a look at all the different cases in the mapping exercise and benchmarking, and to try to set up a category with different axes, where we look at aspects like entrepreneurship, human resources or skills aspects, SME services, internationalization, etc., and integrate these different novel approaches and success factors that we have been able to find into the different axes and into the more specific characteristics. On this basis, we have established a set of policy recommendations that have been used as an input to the roadmap and ideas for the pilot actions. And you will hear about both the pilot actions and the roadmap right afterwards, so I'm not going into this. Next slide, please. So the recommendations we have developed have actually been done, of course, for policymakers on regional, national, and EU levels, including, of course, for the involvement of classes, but also for the RDI community. So it's recommendations on 2 levels for 2 different communities. So to summarize the categorization that we have done, the main success factors that we have been able to identify, and of course it's not an exhaustive list, it's just a summary and some kind of trends, let's say. So we think what we have seen is building on selected regional strengths as identified in the RIS3 is an important success factor. But building on the concrete needs of the ecosystem is very important as well, of course. Each ecosystem is a bit different, and the needs of the players really need to be taken into account. And then what has come out is that of overall importance is that there's a strong commitment and support from the policy side to be able to really involve the stakeholders from the territory. And the involvement of the ecosystem on the other side is, of course, very important to be able to enhance the credibility and to have a critical mass. And here in particular, the bigger players are also very important to be able to create a real initiative. Then having an embeddedness into a larger innovation environment. So, for example, a techno park in which is embedded the initiative that we're looking at, for example, the test bed, is often a very good stimulating factor, let's say, for these approaches. And having the network that's involved in such an innovation environment, of course, is key to be able to set up and to maintain such kind of initiatives. Then we see that the strong cluster involvement in the RIS3 design as a basis for the emergence of a cluster-driven initiative is, of course, very helpful. So, which means that the clusters are involved from the beginning and until a later stage. But at the same time, there needs to be a very clear leadership. So either, of course, through the cluster, if that's the one who is the leader, that could, of course, also be another kind of organization. Very often we have seen that more on policy level. Then speaking about finances, complementary financing sources and funding systems to be able to work on synergies of these different funds, for example, on regional and EU level, are the very important criteria to be able to have some long-term funding commitment and to be able to really set up an initiative in the longer run. And then promotion and marketing of the initiative within the national and regional networks and initiatives. And besides all the good setup and the promotion and the marketing of what is existing, it's also important to be able to assess its success through clearly defined KPIs. Next slide, please. So I think I'm coming to an end. I'm now handing over for the pilot actions overview to Anais, please. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Eva. So I think it's my turn. Let's see the slideshow. Thank you so much, Claire. So good afternoon, everyone. I am going to present the pilot action. So I'm Anais Lecorvec. I am the network manager of the Council of European Bioregion. It's a cluster association mainly working in the life science sectors. We were responsible of the pilot action development together with DSP Valley, a cluster in Belgium. So basically, the main idea behind the pilot action was to develop working groups in different themes. Can I have maybe the next slide, please? Thank you. So basically working on different kind of aspects of the value chain, so looking for the tangible shared value. Sorry, people are getting in. The NMP domain. Can you click on the next, please? So we had different levels that we wanted to work on. So the stakeholder level, the cluster level, and policy level. And if you next. So pilot one was working at the stakeholder level. So working with different kind of people. That's DSP Valley that took care of that. And basically, I will explain to you a little bit more what it was about. Next. So pilot two was really aiming at putting together in a working group the policy and cluster level. And next. And the pilot three was to try to make work together the cluster manager at at cluster level. So really peer-to-peer collaboration. Okay, next. So basically, I'll just get into the details of each of the pilots. Understand pilot also as working group, but this one, the first one, was a very concrete action that started. So with DSP Valley organizing or looking to organize a very challenge-oriented pilot action. So looking for cross-sector collaboration in the cardiovascular disease area. Basically, trying to bring together a variety of stakeholders, look for concrete challenges and select the key challenges coming from the stakeholders and make them work together to find a potential solution. Whereas we also integrated matchmaking within the clusters, the company, the different sectors, and try to use the workshops that were organized as a cross-fertilization tool. So bring parties together and bring partners together to kickstart collaboration. So I'm just gonna get into the workshop that were organized because I think it's actually a very nice and positive outcome of the pilot action. So the first workshop was in 2017. It was held with the idea to bring, as I said, very different actors from the value chain. So from researchers from university, cluster managers, small companies, but also insurance company, doctors, patient associations. So really all the actors of the value chain were present. The idea of the workshop was to co-create on the potential challenges that were identified. So building teams together, a variety of actors to discuss what could be the solutions. And so this was the first workshop. The second one was on the team building aspect. So once the solutions and the challenges were clearly identified, then we went into the team building, so getting people to work together concretely, and then the last one early last year to let's say go really into the details with the researcher and the company and seek for the solutions to the challenges. Next slide, please. Sorry. The second pilot was more in line with this idea of coordination and support action. So it was more into bringing policymakers and cluster manager to collaborate over Europe. So the main objectives initially were to create this working group of regional policymakers, personal representatives, and so on, and cluster managers, of course. We did try to focus on several topics to avoid going into many directions. So there was the investment strategy, transnational strategies, and innovation public procurement. So already broad topics that brought interesting discussions. And to try to share the expertise and experiences and the practices between the participants. So again, the 3 webinars we did here. So first introduction, benchmarking and validation that we did. And the last one that was very concrete with the European Investment Bank to develop and discuss on their tools regarding financing, because obviously financing is always a key issue, but always a good way to attract people to get together to discuss. Next slide, please. The last pilot action, in this case working group, was on the cluster manager collaboration. So how cluster can collaborate to enhance the KET uptake and how they can work together to eventually go back to policymakers, but also to companies and so on to enhance KET uptakes. So we did also 3 webinars. We tried to really focus on cluster collaboration. One of the key issues, obviously, as usual, what kind of ideas to discuss, the idea of creating long-term partnership to enable concrete collaboration. I think out of the experience, obviously, it was a little complex at the early stages of this pilot, due to the fact that KETs are in could be in pretty much any sector, so from life science to developing new shoes. So we had the cluster manager from a variety of sectors, which was very interesting, but at the same time difficult to find concrete issues that the clusters would like to discuss and share and collaborate. So on the 3 webinars that we have done, again, an introductory webinar to explain the working group, to also discuss with the participant what would be their interest in terms of collaboration. Then we did a second one on understanding better these lines of collaboration, where it should go, what should be in these collaboration schemes. And then the final one, after a discussion of this second webinar, to enhance a bit more the collaboration in a very concrete field, which was the sensors, because it's pretty much, let's say, it's used in all the areas, so from life science to, again, shoemaking. So we had discussion on possibilities to collaborate in this concrete sector. Okay, next slide, please. So that's I'm presenting here, and this is the diamonds of the idea, initially from the concept to stakeholder value. So from the lab to the practice, from very big concepts to concrete collaboration. Next, please. Okay. So this slide explains a little bit more what was encountered, especially in pilot 1, but I think it is relevant for the 3 pilots. So as I just mentioned, it is not easy to make people work together in this very large field of very transversal value chains in many sectors. So the hurdles that we found are quite a few. Please, next slide. So first of all this, so the value chain, the way it all goes together, from technology development, product development, the regulatory approach, the reimbursement, so all the distributors finding the buyers and also decision takers and makers, and finally the users. So to englobe all of this value chain, to ensure that everyone on board was interested somehow in either pilot 1, 2, or 3, and make them work together when we talk about technologies that, like I said, can be either implemented in life science, but also could be implemented in many other fields of knowledge. Next, please. Okay, so yes, the big idea of connecting the dots, which was one of the things, I guess, that we that was a challenge in this working group and pilot action. Next, please. So basically, I think I just kind of wrap up on the recommendation that we have from the 3 pilot actions. Basically, to ensure that we try to intensify the development and implementation of EU-wide local smart specialized strategy, kinds of come in line with what Eva has mentioned before, the idea of necessity and need to connect, to carry, to cultivate, and consolidate. Then also, second point, we did mention a lot the idea of the T-shaped people, so people that are especially in one field but are pretty open to collaborate in others. Next, please. So also, and I think this is what comes to reinforce what ClusterNanoRoad is about, is the clusters being clear enabler of connecting these dots and connecting the stakeholders and understanding both the reality that companies are dealing with together with also a more macro, let's say, view on the policies on the regional development and so on. Again, two other important points. So the need to support cross-cutting initiatives. So all the cross that you can find in the slides, and there are more. And then last point on the necessity to establish value-based thinking. Yeah, next slide, please. Okay, so that was the last one. So just to wrap up on the recommendation that I just mentioned, again, it is not an easy task to engage people in working groups, especially because, as all of you probably attending here today, agendas are quite tight, and it's difficult to ensure that somebody that works in shoemaking is interested in talking to somebody that works in photonics, and how we can share ideas and so on. But I think through the pilot action, at least we got some nice conclusion debates that are also to be found on the website, and then I think do confirm what somehow was found in what Eva described, and that we hope is into the roadmap that you will be seeing now. So thank you very much. I think I passed my turn.
Thank you very much, Anise. So the presentations are now handed over to me. My name is Claire Scantleberry from the Nanotechnology Innovation. No, I'm not the Nanotechnology Innovation Council. I'm the Nanotechnology Industries Association. It's been quite a long week so far. So we're going to talk you through the roadmap that was developed to support KETs delivery through regions and clusters. And I will be the last presentation of this afternoon before we move to questions. So really, the objectives of this roadmap, which was really developed from the mapping and the pilot actions, was intended to be a very practical focus on how you could look at developing KET support activities. And this wasn't just about your own KETs inside the region that you could sell outside, but also how to identify KETs within outside of your region to bring in to support existing industrial sectors, because there is ability to develop economic return using both of those actions. And it's a very stepwise approach within the roadmap, because as you will all know, it can be very overwhelming to suddenly be given an extremely complex manual to try and implement. So, and regions and clusters vary hugely across Europe. Some have very significant resources and experience. Others do not have that and have to look at what they can do within the resources available to them. So the project gave us a very good understanding of the types of actions that are useful within Europe, and the roadmap also helps regions to understand what their own resources are available to try and identify and implement good practices. The roadmap itself is designed to be very user-friendly, and the recommendations within it are supported by direct examples and initiatives that you can go to either undertake activities with them or to get good practice and understanding from them. The aim of the project was to launch an initial roadmap, and this will continue to be developed by organisations such as the Council of European Bioregions, and also through NEA in our work with developing support mechanisms for key enabling technologies. So you always come to the question as to who will be able to use this. And of course, the main target is regional policymakers and cluster managers. And these guys should be working very closely together in both the development and the implementation of actions to support KETs uptake and also KETs exploitation outside of the region. And one target group that should also be in here but is not listed are those key expert intermediates. It could be very active universities, it could be science parks. Those are the organisations through which many of these activities will gain their intellectual drive, and so they should always be included in planning and implementation work. So the map itself, as I already mentioned, is a stepwise approach. It starts really on the left-hand side of the picture you see here, looking at an introduction to understanding, help regions and clusters understanding what KETs they have, what KETs they might need, what maturity of technologies are going to be needed, because something that everybody will be aware of is that when you look for a novel technology or you look for a solution, there are thousands and thousands of options out there and that will be sold to you very significantly, but many of them will be too early to be implemented usefully within your region. So it's very important to understand and filter what you may use and what you are capable to implement within your region. Then it looks at good practice in terms of KETs uptake. How do different regions support the development of KETs support activities? Then you look at assessing your own cluster capabilities within being able to support a key enabling technology. Because while many programs look really fabulous, they may require significant investment financially or significant resources from personnel within the region. And regions and clusters always need to be able to match their own capability to what they want to achieve, because then the outcomes will be most practical. And then the final stage of the roadmap looks at the planning and implementation side. It's helping people to select what would be the best program, understanding the resources that will be needed for it and the skills that will be needed for it, and how you develop up key performance indicators to measure the efficacy of its implementation. Because again, the launching of a program is not the end of the process, but really the start of the process. And what you need to see at the end of it is enhanced economic capability for your region. So we're looking quickly inside the roadmap here to show you what it looks like. And the roadmap itself is hosted within the Council of European Bioregions, as well as signposted through the ClusterNanoRoad website. And we did it this way round so that it would have a long-term home within CEBA and could be developed through additional activities. So the first chapter really looks at the NMBP program and key enabling technologies. So it looks at how Europe identifies key enabling technologies, the technology trends that organizations are seeing, and this is particularly important for Europe, to understand what is going to give it either a market advantage now or where it's got gaps that it needs to fill to stay on track competitively. And of course, you need to be able to value your emerging technology, because the impact on your region is very important. So you need to be able to say this will have a high impact and it has a high potential value to companies within our region. And so the roadmap itself gives you a number of actions and a number of support resources. So the actions, for example, here are to map key enabling technologies that you have within your region, to map the value chain actors that you have within your region. And so this can be across any sector, because there are always going to be skilled researchers, skilled specialist commercial service providers, and of course your target user companies at the end of the value chain. You need to be able to assign technology readiness levels to both the technologies emerging within your region, so you know how sellable it actually is, and also to understand the level of TRL that you need for technologies that you wish to implement inside your region, so that you have the most rapid economic impact from them. And so the support mechanisms here, it gives you very good online access to say, understanding how you assign a technology readiness level to something and the different activities that you can take part in to help you do that. So that's chapter 1 of the roadmap, really helping you understand the technical and regional basis behind your work. Chapter 2, it's looking at good practice in KETs uptake support. So it looks at examples of KETs support initiatives, and this is where the mapping exercise done by Inno and Eva is extremely valuable here. It's very detailed and it gives you a lot of good case studies for KETs uptake support. It looks at different RIS3 strategies to understand how these are both developed and also implemented on a practical basis, because they are very different across Europe. And it's very helpful to see what different types of regions have implemented what types of strategies. And the action initially suggested within the roadmap here is to understand the different KETs initiatives targeted, so that you can have a good comprehension of the type of activities that are being implemented and whether they are working or not in other regions. And the initial support mechanism we have here is looking at the role of clusters within smart specialisation strategies. So it's a very practical look at how clusters are a key delivery mechanism and the types of actions that have been implemented through clusters. Other actions recommended here are understanding NMBP assets across Europe, because Europe has invested significantly in a number of different infrastructures and resources that could also be suitable for your region. It doesn't have to be within your region for you to be able to access it. And you also need to understand what KETs you have inside of your region that could be potentially accessible to other regions, both across Europe and be outside Europe. And there are a number of support mechanisms here. A lot of these are already publicly funded. So, for example, you've got the InfraShare programme, you've got the European Strategy Forum for Research Infrastructures, you have the KETs Technology Centres, and you have essentially an alliance that you can join that is sector specific, but there will be others like that within different sectors. Chapter 3 of the roadmap looks at your own capability for developing and implementing effective policies. So we look very much at skills development, and that is for the region itself, for the actors there, but also for the organisations within the value chain that you are looking at. One of the key bottlenecks that we always found within development of clusters and development of high-tech sectors was lack of access to skills management, for example, and experienced management within those sectors. So skills development is always going to underpin successful regional development. The chapter also looks at international collaboration and matchmaking, because this can be an extremely resource-intensive activity, so you need to plan it well and implement it effectively so that you're not spending a lot of time and money on activities that may not actually benefit the organisations within your region. And finally, of course, project management, because no matter how great your idea is, you need to be able to effectively implement it. So, for example, within the chapter for skills development, we're looking at tools such as the Digital Skills and Jobs Coalition. So this is a very good way of understanding where next generation and sort of industry 4.0 skills are being developed and how you can implement that also within your own region. And the European Observatory for Clusters and Industrial Change also helps connect policymakers across Europe through a key set of indicators that you can also apply into your own region. So these are ways to upskill your region or actors directly and yourselves as regional organisations and clusters. Finally, chapter 4, having to plan your innovation. So this is really where you get to the activity of it. It is the hard questions like how you are going to identify and prioritise actions, where you're going to get the money from, because of course these things rarely have enough money to run themselves. Looking at who you should partner with for their successful implementation, both across clusters and across regions. So there are many different opportunities to both work within a sector and across a sector, and within your region and outside your region. So the roadmap makes a few practical recommendations for creating your long list of potential actions, understanding how you will cost them and address key stakeholders, and then, of course, create your key performance indicators for your selected actions so that you can see how well something is being implemented and step in to address it if it is not performing as you wish. So this is still very much under development, as you can see, as only one of these is actually hyperlinked right now, but it gives you, the one that is hyperlinked gives you a very useful look into comparing cluster policies, because it allows you to understand what other clusters have done and how the programs have worked effectively. So we will make the rest of these guides and hyperlinks active, as well as building up the number of resources available within the roadmap as we go through this after the project. So there are a number of cross-cutting support tools that we have referenced a number of times within the roadmap, and these are always very good for you to go and be involved with. So the Vanguard initiative has been extremely effective So we would always recommend people to go and make contact with that, because a number of their programs have worked on both an EU policy level as well as practical regional and cluster level. The European Cluster Collaboration Platform is a very good platform across all sectors to look at what initiatives are being undertaken and how you can take part in them. And it is where you will see a lot of formal EU activities taking place. The Observatory for Clusters is an extremely good mechanism for looking at how KPIs are generated and how you should wish to benchmark your own cluster against performance within other clusters. From a KETs perspective, you have the Observatory and Technology Centre, which again is another very important Europe-wide platform for you to be part in. Taking a step back from specific regional activities, the Innovation Scoreboard, all of you will be aware of, and that is always good to look at because it helps you very much in looking at future trends and also where investment is being targeted. So it's very good to make sure that you are trying to deliver for your region what is going to be most economically beneficial. We've all seen how rapidly other countries such as the US and China can move, and so Europe has to really play to its own strengths rather than trying to run and catch up with activities that may already have taken place. And finally, at the top level, you have the OECD, which will give you very much a global look at where technology trends are going and should also always be a reference point to help guide technology directions and also levels of maturation for economic performance. So that brings us to the end of my presentation on the roadmap, and we are always talking to people about how we can grow it. So we're always looking for feedback on understanding the largest questions, the most significant questions for a region, particularly with regard to the KETs that they have and the KETs that they would like to support, and looking at how regions make decisions and what evidence they use for those decisions behind programs, because that's all very valuable to help grow the roadmap further with good practice. And of course, it's always good to understand what resources and platforms you find valuable, because the ones that we find more valuable, we will promote more highly, because your feedback is very important. And understanding how regions and clusters behave is also very important for continued roadmap development. Do you go and do your research just online? What face-to-face activities do you take part in? Maybe you're missing out on really useful face-to-face activities such as the European Cluster Collaboration Platform hosts that would probably support you quite significantly. And finally, how regions and clusters measure the successes of their programs. How they manage to track often very complex KPIs for their regional impact. Because as we know, key enabling technologies are rarely translated rapidly into GDP or employment numbers because they are long-term high-risk technologies and applications. So it's always extremely difficult to present an economic case to the people that hold the purse strings. So sharing good practice and how that is presented is always very valuable to other regions. So that brings you to the end of my roadmap presentation, and I can hand you back to Marina now to host any questions that we might have for the webinar as a whole. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you, Claire, and all the presenters today. So now it's the time. If you have any questions, please just let us know. Just unmute yourself and put your questions. No questions.
Often people are very quiet in webinars.
Yes, but you can write.
Yeah, there is the chat.
Hi, it's Monica.
Sorry? Think we have a question?
Hello, it's Monica Gosh from Silesian Nano Cluster. First of all, I would like to congratulate you for the all work you've done. I think it's very valuable and needed, and it fills the gap that I personally will for sure use. And I have a few questions. First is, how do you see the development? Is this project finished, or are you planning some actions after creating this roadmap to help implement it for cluster organizations, for example?
Do you want me to talk about that, Marina, first? I'm sure there are several people that can answer.
Okay, Claire,
Yeah.
please go on.
Yeah, sure. And this is also linked to Anis at CEBA. The intention was to make this a long-term mechanism, which is why we've hosted it through the Council of European Bioregions rather than in the project-specific website. But we would certainly like to continue to grow it. I think it'll be best implemented through activities that the European Cluster Collaboration Platform runs, and it can be used to host results from future projects as well. And of course, any feedback to CEBA or myself about additional resources that regions find useful, we can use directly and update the map. So it should continue to grow after the project ends because it's directly relevant to all of the partners in the project. I don't know if Anis wants to follow up on how CEBA is planning on promoting it.
Yeah, sure. So hello, Monica. It was very nice actually meeting you in Poland for the Nano Poland and the workshop and the time that we had there. So on your question, just like Claire said, the idea is obviously the project officially ends today, but both the website that we have redeveloped at the end just to make sure it's attractive and it keeps on getting input, especially through the roadmaps. So what we will do as part of, let's say, sustainability measure for this project, because we think all the work that is done here can be very interesting for now and in the future. So we will update at the first, let's say the first year on a monthly basis, whatever inputs we get onto the roadmap, and we will keep on advertising it both directly on the website, that is ClusterNanoRoad.eu, but also on our web platform as a Council of European Bioregions. So as a project as such, it is not, well, it finishes, but we will keep on promoting and ensuring that more are coming into the roadmap.
Okay, thank you, Anais. It was also very nice to have you here in Poland. And another question I have, maybe considering pilot 3 action, it was covered, but I wonder, did you cover the topic of internationalization of the clusters? And if yes, how did you measure it? Because I think it's the to create the measures that are comparable, and I wonder if you covered this topic.
Yes, thank you for your question. Well, actually, we did in the initial discussion of this pilot 3 within the cluster collaboration pilot. So idea of how can we support each other in the KET uptake. So internationalization was mentioned, but as I said in the presentation, one of the problem is that KET is in many different fields. So as you know, you are in let's say in the nano field, so it's easier for you to get, but as the participants were from the life science sector, but also from a variety of sector, from photonics, we had also people from the shoemaking business that were converting into let's say an MVP and KET technologies. But the problem was that in terms of internationalization, there was no clear comparison between the people that were participating. So we decided to, let's say, give a few insight on the programs that were existing, to share ideas and in the pilot to, let's say, discuss what people were experimenting, but we did not go much further because of the issue of the complexity of the variety of actors in the cluster pilots.
Okay, thank you. It's as I see, it's a difficult topic for everyone to measure.
Okay, Monique, thank you. Do you have any further questions?
I do, but maybe we can move to the questions that are written first, so that some people have answers.
We had a question from Anna. So hi, Anna, saying, how are you considering any proactive way of raising awareness in the use of the roadmap by regions? I think it would be very important to have, as well as having the web-based resource, which is really good, is we can develop final set of promotional materials that all partners can take with them wherever they go, because many of the partners attend a lot of regional events. And so it would be nice to see a calendar of activities for the rest of this year where all of the project partners can go and promote how the roadmap is working. So I think that should be part of the final project activity. It's like post-project sustainability in terms of visibility, because we have the web tool. We need to make sure that it stays visible all the time. I don't know if Anise and Marina also want to comment on that.
No. Yeah, actually, this suggestion of the calendar, it's also something that Paula has spoke about, and I think it's a very good idea, and we can easily integrate this on our final report, or even as an individual document. Okay, yeah. Because surely we still need to disseminate and put strong efforts on the dissemination of the roadmap, because it's the final achievement of the project. We end up with a roadmap. Now it's time to launch it to the world.
Mm. And we certainly would take this and promote it at Euronano Forum, which I know is not a cross-sectoral or regional event. However, it's highly focused on nano as a key enabling technology. And so we already have plans for Euronano Forum that we will take the project with us. And Anna also said, can we please add a reference to the platform for smart specialisation for industrial modernisation? And we can do that. We will add it into the roadmap because obviously all recommendations are welcome. So, are there any further questions from the audience?
Okay, so maybe me once again, it's Monica. I was just looking through your website on ClusterNanoRoad, and I see like these interesting documents, the roadmap itself, and the benchmarks. But I wonder if you think of publishing the specific outcomes of the pilot actions, like. Anais showed the pilot 3 was specifically on this cluster management level, and the others covered of different disciplines. And I wonder if any document on this was created and could be shared.
Yes, I apologize because you should be there, but I'm just finishing it, so everything will be available very soon. Yes.
Okay, that's nice.
The conclusions were being drawn this month, so you will find it very soon.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm looking forward to it.
Great.
So I should say this webinar was also recorded, so we will also post a recording of this through the project website and through the Council of European Bioregions, and it can hopefully also be used to support the roadmap use in the future. So Marina, it sounds like people are finished, so do you want to wrap up and close the webinar?
Sorry, Claire, now I missed you.
Oh, sorry, I think that we seem to have run through the questions, so did you want to wrap up and close the webinar?
Yeah, for sure. So if there are no further questions, so I think we can close this final validation webinar. Thanks a lot for those participating. Thanks for the questions, and keep on touch with us and keep tuned to our website. Okay, have a nice afternoon.
Thank you very much, and we'll contact all the attendees with the recording from the webinar and also all of the slides.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.